Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to talk more about our discovery of the Quran with the Christian eyes. And I'm sure that you have a lot of questions. I see in the commentaries that people are a little bit confused. Muslims, Christians, what is this guy saying? Is he a real Muslim? Is he a real Christian? Well, what is he? And the question is, why does he emphasize so many similarities between both books? Well, I do that just because the similarities are there. I mean, this is what I see. I see an alphabet that comes from the Syriac. I see the same stories in both books. I see the same vocabulary. And later on, we're going to talk about the theology. But let us finish this with a small reflection where Islam could maybe come from. This is something I don't know. As again, I say I'm not the judge, I'm not the detective. I just see the facts. And the evidence shows me the similarities between both religions. And before I want to make this small reflection about what I think could be the origin of Islam, I want to show you a couple of pictures. And I want to ask you, what are these people doing? So unfortunately, we are not live, so you cannot tell me right away. But I guess that some of you would say, well, these people are singing. Somebody's praying, he has the hands like that. They are clothed in white, they have some hats. One is reading a book. They're only men, and children are also there, but only boys, and they look very, very serious. Who are these people? What are they doing? Here they're on carpets. Well, most people would say they're Muslims, but they're not Muslims, they are Christians. This is the Church of the Samaritans in Palestine. People who have been taking off their shoes, washing their hands, their feet, their face before praying, and praying that way, dressing that way, 550 to 600 years before Islam started. So the question is, who took from whom? I mean, the answer is clear. Here is something we have in Christianity that Islam has taken over. Don't want to criticize, we just say that's a fact. And in the same way, I want to show you a couple of pictures I made myself. What is this here? Is it a part of a mosque? Is it maybe a church? What do you think? And most people would say, well, that's taken from a mosque, and they are right. This is taken from the Museum of Mevlana in Turkey, in Konya, very holy place for many people. This is taken from a mosque. But what about this door here? What do you think? Is it from a mosque? Is it from a church? Also, most people would say that's a mosque, but that's taken from a Christian monastery in southern Turkey, a place called Mor Gabriel in Midyat, close to the Syrian border. That's Christian architecture 300-400 years before Islam emerged. In another monastery here in close to Mardin, we have the same pattern we find in the mosque worldwide. But you see here's a cross. Here's some writings which are Aramaic and not Arabic. So here is a church. And that's long before Islam came. The last picture here. Is that a church or is that a mosque? When I have seminars worldwide, I ask the question and most people say, well, we don't know. Some say that's a mosque, some say that's a church. And whatever you think, you are both right, because this is the Hagia Sophia church in Istanbul in Turkey. This church was built 537 by Justinian, so just the time before Islam started, the classical Islam as we know it. It has been a church for over 950 years until Mehmed II made a mosque out of it when he took over Constantinople in 1453. And until 1934 it was a mosque, then it became a museum, and just recently, 2020, again it became a mosque. But the origin of this building is a church, and the architecture is the architecture of a church. Actually, all the mosques in the world are built according to the pattern of that very famous church. So who took from whom? You have the answer. So this is something we have to consider, and that brings me to the next level of discussion. is there any evidence that there was something similar to Islam, or if you want, something different from Judaism and Christianity beside those religions? To answer this question, let's go back to the Bible and see that Noah had 3 sons according to the Bible. Some Muslims and Jews say he had 4 sons, but the Bible speaks about 3. And one of them was called Shem. In Arabic, in Islam also Shem. Shem had 5 sons. One of them is called Aram, who is the father of the Arameans. Another one is called Arphaxad. Arphaxad had a son called Shelah, who could be the Saleh of the Quran. Saleh had a son called Eber, a grandson called Peleg, and it goes on until we have Nahor, who is the grandfather of Abraham, or Ibrahim if you want. So it means that if we consider, as the Quran and also the Old Testament and the New Testament say, Abraham as our spiritual ancestor, we also have to remember that beside Abraham, there were other children and grandchildren of Shem who knew the true God, the God of their ancestor Noah. So the question is, where are those people? One of them we have seen are the Arameans, who are parallel to the Jews and to the Muslims, who are the Christian Aramaic church. Now, if we go back to Abraham, Abraham had 2 sons, Isaac and Ismail. Ishaq and Ishmael, if you want. Some people say that Isaac is the father of the Jews and Ismail the father of the Arabs or the Muslims, at least on a spiritual level. But most people forget that Abraham had a lot of other sons. According to the Bible, he had Zimran, Yokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, Shua, and many others. So if we talk about Abraham as the ancestors of the Jews and the Muslims, what happened with the other sons? Did they apostatize, or did some of them keep the true God of their father Abraham? That's a question we don't know, but possibly some Abrahamic traditions have been kept in the Oriental world, as some Semitic traditions could have been kept as well. In the same way, Isaac had 2 sons. One was Jacob, one was Esau, the father of the Edomites, which we found in the north of Saudi Arabia, of today's Jordan. Where are those people? One answer is that the Bible speaks about people who outside of Judaism, outside of Abraham, worship the god El. So one man called Melchizedek, called the king of Salem or Shalem, the king of something related to Islam, Salam, Islam. Abraham met that king and he becomes very, very impressed by this man and asks him to bless him. And in the Torah, in Genesis 14, we find a prayer of blessing that Melchizedek gives to Abraham. I quote, "Blessed be you, Abraham, by God the Most High, honor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God the Most High." What do we have here? We have God the Most High. In Hebrew, El Elyon. El, Allah, something similar, but at least something outside of Judaism. Second, God is presented as the Most High, Akbar, the one who is higher than anything else. This is way before the Fatiha, way before the Quran, way before Muslims said Allahu Akbar. And I said in another study that Christians use Allah Akbar also. Also in this blessing we have God, the honor of heaven and earth, Malik Yawmiddin, and Rabbil Alamin, something we have in the Quran, in the Fatiha. Again, this is not an Abrahamic tradition, but this is something outside of Abrahamic children, Jews and Muslims. Another interesting story, the story of Job, Ayub, which we find in the Bible. And Job was older, was before Musa. And the Torah tells us that Job made some sacrifices for the mistakes of his children. We know from the Bible, we know from the Quran in Al-Baqarah, the surah called the cow, that Musa asked his people to sacrifice animals to God. Now, how did somebody who was before Musa sacrifice animals? Where did he know that from? I think he knew that from Noah, who also sacrificed, from Shem, from other traditions besides Judaism and Islam. Another figure we find is Shu'aib. Shu'aib in Arabic is the name we have in the Bible for Jethro. Jethro was the father-in-law of Musa. Musa went out of Egypt, it was a pagan land, and he got married with the daughter of that man. Now, would Moses marry a heathen woman? Probably not. And I think he had no reason to do that. On the contrary, he went to that man and worked with him. Why? Because Jethro, or Shu'aib if you want, he's called in the Bible a priest Reuel, a priest of El. Again here, we have the name El or Allah outside of Judaism, outside of Islam, in another tradition, this time the Midianites, who were cousins of Abraham. We could go on, but I want to go to the New Testament this time, where Jesus not only has sent 12 disciples, the so-called 12 apostles, which we know from the Bible, but in the Bible, Jesus also organized another movement among the Samaritans. We know that Jesus went to Samaria, and a woman on Jacob's well preached to her people that Jesus was the Messiah. The question is, where are those people today? And as we have seen in a few pictures, the Samaritans still keep traditions, believing in Jesus, but worshipping like Muslims started to do hundreds of years after them. Jesus, in Mark 5, organized a third movement. There was a man coming from the east of Jordan, the plain called Araba, and this man was possessed by demons, and Jesus chased the demons away from him. This man wants to follow Jesus, and Jesus said, no, go back to your people and preach to them what God has done for you. And that's what this man did, because when Jesus came again across the Jordan, there were thousands of people waiting for him as the Messiah. And the question is, what happened with these people in Arabia, in Araba, who accepted Jesus as the Messiah, Al-Masih, beside Judaism? And the last question I have is, what about John the Baptist, called Yahya ibn Zachariah? John the Baptist also believed in Jesus the Messiah. Where have his disciples been? I mean, his descendants. The answer is that probably beside the Jews, beside the Christians, beside the disciples of Jesus, beside Abraham's 2 children, Shem had other children who worshipped El, the true God. Abraham didn't have just 2 sons, but others who probably also kept Abrahamic traditions. Jesus had different disciples among the Jews, but among the Arabs as well. John the Baptist, the Samaritans, and so on. So it could be that Islam has to do with these other traditions of the true one God, El or Allah, call him something like that. All these historical evidences could explain the similarities between the Bible and the Quran. By the way, I wrote a small book here explaining some of the similarities in a very simple way. So if you want to have this book, just send me a message and I'll try to get a copy for you. You can find it in libraries also, Amazon, but you can also write to me. I'll be glad to help you on that. Anyway, I really want to thank you for your fidelity in watching my episodes, also this one, but the previous one. Actually, we have come to the last part of this season. It was an introduction to the Quran and the Bible. And later on, we're going to go into deep theology, comparative theology between the Bible and the Quran. But now we want to have a small break, not a break in our programs, but do something different. For example, we're going to visit a mosque, visit a church, talk with people here and there, and then we'll come back here to this place and go into Quranic and Bible theology point by point. Thank you again. I have to say the result exceeds my expectation. A lot of people are watching. Gradually I try to respond to all the comments. It's not that easy because there are many and I don't have so much time. That's why I try to respond to the questions you have concerning the program, the episode specifically. No need to say that I don't have too much time for criticism because this is not what I want to emphasize here. I'm not here to accuse or to defend or to attack. If you want to do that, that's not something that is very relevant to me. That's why I'm not going to take too much time on responding on that. But thank you. Thank you for being there. Thank you for subscribing also and recommending this program, Bible and Quran, to your friends and to other people. So see you next week. Again, Assalamu alaikum.